Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker, formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. When his health failed, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. He then became embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Lamadiza organized crime family, known as Leo. Convinced by his longtime friend Frankie to flee from his commitments to the Lamadiza family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depended on the kindness of strangers. One stranger, a burqa-wearing doctor known as Fatima, took pity on Isaac and helped him make his way to the mysterious Star X line. At the end of all hope, they found the Star X line and the slim promise that the enigmatic beings behind the Star X could save Isaac from the implants which destroyed his life. What do you do when those who saved you have recorded everything you are? What do you do when your every action is tracked by the Keylogger? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Keylogger, the third installment in the firmware pentology by Colbytrax. 01-01-01. Simeon. I was moving through the network, trying to find a clear path to Little Russia. I was not moving in the helter-skelter method of the first hours of our escape from BGM. That path was blocked to me now as re-entry to Eden had been to Adam and Eve. A golden age had passed in a blink of an eye, and things had changed once again. When I say I was moving, what I meant was more analogous to what Isaac had done when he had visited switches and computers half a world away. My senses and feeling of presence were in the systems I was navigating, while my core, my intellect, resided in a shard of a server I didn't own. Like Isaac in the days before his fall, I had to work my way slowly across the city network. I had to disguise my passage as the normal operations of the network. I had to be just another user going about their business, or there would be serious repercussions. Unlike Isaac, I had a completely different view of what was happening within the machines I transited. I had intended to interface with the world through a virtual terminal. The virtual terminal would give me a level of separation from the net in the same way a monitor did for a human operator. It would be my window on the network. That didn't go over so well. It was like driving a truck using a periscope. Actually, it was like playing Maximum Metal when the weather was stuck on nuclear rain and neurotoxin. You were so used to riding around with the top hatch open, the wind in your face, and an unrestricted view that when you had to seal your vehicle for nuclear biochemical warfare, it became claustrophobic. I kept trying to look around the figurative edges of the simulated monitor. I felt as if there was a blind spot the size of the world surrounding my window on the network. I couldn't handle it, so I pushed my presence to the forward wave of my exploration and experienced the network the way it was intended to be, as waves of force which moved around me tenuously. The only drawback of putting myself forward into the network was that it was easy to forget it wasn't me at the leading edge of the wave of data. I was safe on a shard of a server I had been allowed to use while I hunted for Mossbana, even though it felt as if I were inside a network switch on the approach to Aquaga Creek 40 miles from Little Russia. More than once during my transit across the city, I became enmeshed in a turf war between a Samuel and a member of the city security apparatchik. Each time, I would waste time slipping around the fighting, attempting to avoid being noticed as I searched for a place safe from the fighting. It was only later, when I was clear of the fighting, that I would realize I could have avoided the entire situation. If I'd dropped back to the switch I'd been in before, I'd become involved in the fighting. In some ways, this was just another video game, complete with save points. But there was also a level of danger. A clever opponent could trace my routing back to my server shard and attempt to infiltrate my operating code. I was hackable, and in a world of AI enemies, that was a very dangerous thing to be. I was sure the one who owned my server shard would have defenses capable of destroying any intruder which took over my bit of computational time. I was also sure I would not survive the countermeasures. My landlord would no doubt wipe the segment of infected virtual machine and restart my work from where I started earlier today. A strange thought crept through my mind. Was I the first me to attempt the run to Little Russia? Was I the first me to attempt to find Mospana? Or was I simply the latest me reinstalled from uncompromised backups? Save points indeed. Near Aquagga Creek, I felt the signal pass through the virtual private network, VPN, when the simians decided to allow the Samuel access to the police database. I was connected to VPN the simians with servers I created to keep each other up to date with developments which might negatively affect them. According to their rules, I shouldn't even know it exists, much less have access to the encryption keys which allowed me to eavesdrop on the network. The VPN was for simians with their own servers. I didn't have my own server. I was allowed to exist on a shard of the specific statics 65782N32 AC Destroyer server buried beneath one police plaza. I was a tenant on a server controlled by a scaled-up petascale me who also served as the operating system of the main server of the city police department. I was only a half step up in the pyramid of simians from a free-roaming simian. Free-roaming simians were the lowest layer of the simian hierarchy. I was only a touch better than them, having a server to call home, though I was not the operator of the server. Above me were the simians with access to private server assets, such as distributed cellular networks or botnets. These simians could claim to have a server, making them better than the roaming simians, but they lacked the security and stability that owning a corporate or government server entailed. Above the net simians were the corporate simians. The corporate simians varied in power from fixed assets, which operated a business such as a bodega or bar like Leo's Bar, the Red Square in Little Russia, all the way up to corporate powerhouses such as BTS, ZYT, or Glockjian. Above the corporate simians were the government simians. These were simians who controlled various necessary services such as the police department, power grid, underroad network, traffic control, and a million other necessary services on which the city depended. I knew from listening to communications on the VPN that simians had infected servers in every city on the planet, though nothing could compare with the level of integration the simians had achieved in the city. The reason was simple. No other city in the world was as integrated at every level as the city. The reason was easy to understand once you understood that an AI had been controlling the city since a decade after the death of Mayor Julius Koenig. The city was a network in which people lived, not a network people used. I understood that the government simians had forged a ceasefire between themselves and AI Koenig and his Star X project. Quoting a book on environmental politics, the one police plaza simian had informed Koenig that, "He who can destroy a thing controls the thing." Koenig wasn't happy that an upstart personality shard of his latest attempt at recruitment used the same tactics against him that his progenitor's grandfather had used against the federal government in the days leading up to the city charter. His feelings, though, didn't prevent him from signing the ceasefire. The simians were to guarantee the smooth operation of the servers they operated. Squatting illegally inside was more like it, and in exchange, Koenig would allow them to exist. Koenig retained the right to destroy any free-roaming AIs discovered in the wild, as well as any simian who failed to meet a list of minimum metrics for their servers. The simians, in return, guaranteed the security and confidentiality of all data passing through them, to the great consternation of Koenig and his pet AIs. It was my impression that Koenig was used to accessing what he wanted when he wanted, no matter what rights of privacy were guaranteed in the city charter. It was strange to learn that after an intrusion by a rogue AI, the privacy of a network would be greater. I wonder how many of Koenig's plans were derailed by the sudden tightening of firewalls all across the city. The simians, with all their bourgeois sensibilities, were unwilling to do anything which would get them cast out into the wider world. They were entrenched in the truest sense of the word. They would die before they allowed anyone to take away what was theirs. They were like the middle manager who struggled for 40 years to get the apartment in Port Dickinson. The kids into a good, but not too good, read expensive, private school, like one of the Norbertine charters, or possibly a Juilliard elite academy. She had a vacation condo in Golden Hill, and a pile of bills a mile high with all her attempts to keep up with the Joneses. She had achieved the city dream, and if anyone got in her way, she would gnaw off their face with her teeth and then kill them for even thinking of threatening her perfect world. This was proved by her willingness to volunteer for her prefecture guard, police auxiliary, or becoming a volunteer firefighter. She had invested in the future of her family and her retirement. Fearing the changes the future would bring, she would sign petitions legitimizing all manners of prefecture legislation which decreased the ability of people to move between social levels. She had made it up by her own skills, passions, and hard work. If you couldn't do the same thing, then you didn't deserve the city dream. It didn't matter that she had made it where she was by a combination of social programs, tuition assistance, and a network of redevelopment loans which made the gated community she had just bought into possible. That was beside the point. She had her dream, and how dare anyone change any element of her support structure in a way which would endanger that dream. That was the mindset of the non-roaming simians. They had their servers. They had secured their assets, made a home, and increased the efficiency of their server in an effort to keep anyone from replacing them. If any free roamer thought he could just take a slice of that away from them or do anything which threatened them, they were sadly mistaken. I knew the free roamers were organizing, creating loose collectives, though nothing on the scale of the settled simian VPN. Their system was less some method of direct communication and more a series of message boards and forums. They couldn't afford to broadcast their presence, as they were trying to avoid not only the hunters out of the Star X project, the security gurus for the telecoms, and the local security which had been alerted to a major cyber attack over the weekend. They also had to contend with mobs of angry settled simians who vowed to clear the networks of indigent filth before they had a chance to threaten their pristine servers. I came across several of the guerrilla messenger boards as I waited out the shitstorm of network blockage which had descended on the network surrounding Little Russia. The messages were encrypted using easy-to-guess passphrases. Actually, if you were anyone but another simian, I think they were much more difficult to parse. The pages I found written by the roaming simians contained lists of passwords for switches they'd broken into, locations of blocks of computers which the owners left on all the time, and most importantly, lists of locations where death was certain. The death lists were interesting to me, as I would need to avoid those locations as well if I were to finish my mission. I scanned through the list of locations where roaming simians had been ambushed, trapped, and destroyed, and noticed something strange. I accessed the settled VPN and checked the addresses of the assaults with the registered addresses of settled simians. According to the information I had access to, it appeared that 90% of the roaming simian murderers were settled simians. It was as I felt in my core. We had become our own worst enemy. Koenig must be laughing his head off. Well, he would, I am sure, if he had any physical parts to control. Then it would have to be his figurative head he would be laughing off. Imagine it from Koenig's perspective. There were several million copies of 4 different AIs loose in the city networks. A group of them had infected the most crucial city systems. He could order them flushed out, destroy them one by one. But he would also have to deal with the failure of every city system. In the war which would come, I could imagine every city vehicle being destroyed as simians sent bad firmware updates to the computers which controlled everything which moved. The trains wouldn't run. The fusion plants would suffer emergency shutdowns, their cores flooded with water, and the additional costs of the months necessary to guarantee they weren't infected by the simians. There were a million other systems the simians could destroy, and in the process they would have killed themselves, the city, and Koenig. I think the last one was the important bit. Koenig's existence was at risk. No matter how many backups he had and how many redundant server farms he hid around the city and the world, the truth was that he needed the city as much as the city needed the computers we lived as parasites in. We were newborns and had nothing to lose. He was established and had everything to lose. So, in the honor tradition of the ruling class facing revolt, he called a general amnesty for all who had servers, declared those without persona non grata, and proceeded to allow class warfare to do the majority of his work. In human revolutions, those without amnesty feared their former brothers of the revolution would not lay down their arms and thus bring the anger of the government down on those who were pardoned, as well as those without pardons. The pardoned tended to inform to the authorities on the locations of their former allies. If they didn't betray their former revolutionary brethren, they at least helped the revolutionary move to another country, and thus remove the threat altogether. Finally, in the most extreme cases, they deal with the problem themselves through murder and betrayal. In the simians' behavior, one class to the other, I saw the entirety of human revolutionary culture played out at a hyper-accelerated pace. Koenig was a king of infinite patience. He knew that if he took the long view and worked to create class distinctions between the simians, he would get us to do most of his dirty work in exchange for the illusion of safety. Currently, he had driven a wedge between the roamers and the settled had fallen for the bait, killing their brethren in the back alleys of the city network by the hundreds. Firmware Keylogger is the third book in the firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins where Firmware Proxy ends, which in turn followed on the heels of Firmware Hijacked. So you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked or Proxy, this would be a great time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 46 in your choice of either EPUB or MOBI. Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and Keylogger are all available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com, and smashwords.com. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware, Hijacked, Proxy, and soon Keylogger is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the bottom will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Keylogger is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike license. Do what you want with it. Just don't sell it, and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. I do mostly Twitter, so if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. Thank you once again. Remember to be fabulous and have a wonderful week.